Now, I think we should move on to the main lady author of the day,
Mm-hmm.
Joan Didion, who again, an author that I've heard a million things about. I felt like I knew a million things about her before I even picked up the novel. I was very happy that you suggested this because it's not a book that I ever thought to read, but I hear it mentioned all the time. And one of my favorite all-time authors and just people in general is Bret Easton Ellis. So I always like to see where his style comes from, and it definitely comes from Play It As It Lays and the White Album, in terms of his nonfiction and like commentary. But I loved this novel. I thought it was very, very good. And it actually, it's funny, upon completing it, I liked it. But the next day when I was just sitting down and chewing on it a little bit more, I found way more things that I liked about it that made it even better, which is the sign truly of a great novel. And you're correct in the pacing of it. Very much like Less Than Zero. I think Less Than Zero is Bret Easton Ellis's Play It As It Lays. And it starts, you'll see just literally a thought, an italicized thought chapter for a paragraph, and then you're on to the next one. And it's a lot of people talking past each other. It's a lot of people talking around each other, while it's a woman who's gone through, I'll say hell, really.
Yeah.
And in a short period of time, you don't feel like you know the full story, every single detail, but you know enough to know that like this, a lot of people would give up going through this, and a lot of people think she does give up, and that's the problem. And please tell me your history with this book and how it influenced you.
Well, I've read it so many times. I really couldn't tell you how many. I've read it in one sitting. I've reread it in one sitting, because it's so quick and engaging, and everything. Um, I don't know. Like Joan, in her nonfiction, she has this very, I would say, almost slightly prim tone.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Oh yeah, it's cold. Yeah, it's cold. It's a little cold, I think. But yeah,
And it's very proper.
mm-hmm. It feels like somebody holding back for etiquette purposes, but like not really,
Yes.
like yeah,
It's
yeah,
someone being a
yeah.
professional. It's someone being a professional. And so, when I went into reading this novel, I had diminished expectations because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then seeing her let her hair down, and also it's important to keep in mind that this is after the White Album,
Yes.
and she wrote that essay about Sharon Tate's murder,
Mm-hmm.
and basically how the 60s ended. And this novel is very much a 60s ended novel because it's about a young actress model whose marriage is falling apart. She and her husband are both cheating on each other. She falls pregnant, has an abortion. This is pre Roe v. Wade.
I'll say.
And she has, sort of like a John Cassavetes character
Yes.
windfall or downfall. And it's very relatable. It's very interesting to read this in 2024 because Joan Didion was a conservative,
Big time.
and this novel to me, I've read this so many times. I read this when I was much younger and absorbed everything in very different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so this time when I read it, I'm older and I relate to the protagonist more. So in the novel, her mother died about a year prior,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, it's been 6 months.
I
So
know. I'm so sorry. That's I can't even imagine.
thank you. But anyways, that you know what I mean. Like that headspace is very strange. It's very unique. It changes everything. The way she describes not wanting to eat and not wanting to be around people, sleeping outside, being afraid of plumbing, just
Yeah.
all the paranoia, plus the paranoia and the terror of her abortion. Because throughout the novel, you do get the sense that although she does feel very frigid, although she wants to be alone and is easily tired and repulsed by people, this character did want a family. This character did want partnership. And this character is you know, having her solar return in this society where everyone's swinging. You know, in her friend group in the novel, everyone's having sex with each other.
Yeah.
Everyone's cheating. Everyone's having abortions. You know, she gets her hair cut and she hears a woman loudly complaining about a pelvic abscess.
Yeah.
And she's in this society that is not protecting her and is putting a boot over her dream. And she's starting to age and she's starting to lose her looks and she feels worthless and nihilistic. And I think this is a really interesting novel to bring back in this year.
Oh, definitely. And I think one of the things I related to strongly as I have even though that she's so cold in the book and you feel like it's Mariah, right? Not even Maria.
Mariah. Mm-hmm.
Mariah, yeah. If you feel like Mariah is very short on words, thinking more than not, but also at times like not thinking, like kind of just really just like flatlining neurologically a little bit. But you get the idea that that's just the way the story's being told to you, rather than like it's probably the mind is probably racing a lot more. And there's these times where Mariah only feels good while in motion, which is like literally like a huge. I went through a horrible like series of panic attacks like every single day, like debilitating, like to the point of pure like pretty bad. I'll just say that much. Like where it felt like one of those ones where you'd have a panic attack at like 10 a.m. and then you feel like going to sleep after. Like it just is like it just takes so much out of you. I guess that's probably why I relate to like Dostoevsky writing like 10 pages on like brushing shoulders with someone or something.
Oh,
like
me too. That sort of epileptoid hyper awareness.
There you go. It's the same concept with that, even though Didion does it in far fewer words and
By the
far.
way,
What's that?
She was also epileptoid style pathology. I need to find her handwriting, but she was sick in a similar way to Dostoevsky. So sorry, keep going with that thought because I like that parallel.
No, exactly, because there are these times where, especially when things are going like really really bad, where she's just like going out to the casinos and she says she'll never walk around these casinos at night, but then like obviously just is doing, walking around in these Las Vegas casinos, and she said the best things about that is just going in and out and temperature differences, and that's totally like how it is. It's just like the worst thing I can do is just sit here, because when I just sit here and stop, even though that's kind of what you need to do, because you're just pushing it off, you're like putting it on credit, putting it on layaway, and eventually the bill is going to have the red letters on it and collect. But as in real time, you just want to prolong that feeling, especially after a lot of trauma, like actual trauma, not like TikTok trauma, like real trauma, because she's had a graphic abortion, like a very graphic abortion scene. Sadly, I don't obviously I got different parts than that, but like I read 3 novels back to back about that had like pretty bad like vaginal damage in them, and I was just like, man, I don't wish to do that anymore. Gone Girl has that little part, where she she
we
kind
need to
of
switch it up.
The next book I read, I'll be really mad if there's vaginal damage in it. I'll be like, we can't do 4 in a row. I'm trying to remember what the one before that. Oh, Lolita. That's no, there's that one part in Lolita where it's still, that line is etched in my brain, unfortunately, but it's there's some bad ones in there, but like she gets an abortion on newspaper, on a stack of newspaper, and there's a guy, it's like as though she's gonna go score a bunch of heroin. She gets like driven to this weird like part of the city. This guy will meet you here, he will take you here, and then this doctor, and she gets an abortion that laying down on a bunch of newspaper, because there was this old like wives tale of newspaper being like disinfectant.
Sterile.
Oh my gosh, no, that's not true. Like what the hell.
That character, the guy who drives her around, is actually very fascinating. I took note of him. The way she describes him is so disgusting. Like, he had a moon face and a soft eunuch's body. His hand was pale, freckled, and boneless. Dude, this is Laura Palmer who lived. You
Yeah,
know, this
yeah,
is Laura
exactly.
Palmer. She's
This Lorville,
awesome.
it's amazing. Yeah, no, it's that's exactly what it is. But yeah, there's these parts. But now there's a character named BZ. Now, if you've seen the Frank Perry film, BZ is a lot more prevalent. He has many more lines. He's like in almost as many scenes as Tuesday Weld, it feels like. But
Yeah.
in the novel, he's kind of this in the same way like Less Than Zero. Julian's all in the movie, Robert Downey
He's
Jr.
a
But
sinister homosexual.
and he's a looming presence. He is the true nihilist of the book, and I would argue that if there was Carter is the conscious villain, and BZ is the subconscious villain of the book.
Yes, and BZ, honestly, every single character is completely repulsive.
Yes.
Helene
Yeah, Helene is
reminds me so
horrible.
much of
Mhm.
the best friend in My Year of Rest and Relaxation.
Okay, I haven't read it,
This
but
very like
yeah.
dolled up
Mhm.
girl, the girl who dies in 9/11.
Yeah.
Helene is just like a bimbo, constantly getting a boob job or different facelifts, like dyeing her hair.
Mhm.
Um, Mariah's trying to talk to her about what's going on in her life, and Helene is like, "Oh, how can I travel without my hairstylist? He should be here by now." Just talking, like you said earlier, everyone's talking over and through each other. And
Mhm.
so I remember reading a couple reviews of this book earlier, just out of curiosity. I usually avoid reading other people's
I know.
reviews,
Yeah.
but people said the dialogue. This was a Reddit thread. People said the dialogue is so unrealistic. People don't talk like that, and I was absolutely disagreeing, because people do talk like this.
All the
If you
time.
listen up, yeah, people talk past each other. When I write dialogue, I always make people talk sort of at a slant.
Yeah.
Like half a question is answered,
Yeah.
tangent, etc. And that's the more natural cadence.
I agree. I agree 100%. And I think if you don't think people talk like that, you do talk like that and you participate in it and you don't realize that the conversation is nothing and you're just having meaningless conversations but they're fine with you. And look, maybe that's a stock human trait that I should learn to adapt for success in life, I guess. But if you can't do that, it's maddening. And it's not maddening to read because it's a kind of comforting that you're like, oh, you see it too. Like, okay, this person sees it too. These kind of like vapid conversations where people just can't have silence.
Yeah.
Despite how much I talk all the time, I actually can go hours and hours without saying anything and it's totally fine. But there's so many people you can tell are like, I got to bring up the weather right now. Like I have to bring up the weather or else like this conversation's over. And you're like, no, you don't. I see the same weather you do. It's fine.
No,
Like
I agree.
you have a little truth bomb about our character, the sinister homosexual, the BZ character.
Yeah.
I'm interested in hearing about this because I'll be honest. You sent me a thing and I'm like, all right, I glanced at it and I'm like, but I want you
Mm-hmm.
to explain it to me because it felt very like Dr. Hilarious, like Crying of Lot 49, like situation happening. So what is going on with the name BZ? Nobody else has a nickname in the book. Nobody else has an abbreviation. There's no one named like Skippy or something, and then BZ. It's not a Stephen King 50s novel like where everybody has like little Happy Days names and stuff. Like he this is a book where everybody just has a name, and then there's a guy named BZ, and I found that strange. That's the two letters that don't go together as like a abbreviation. So what did you uncover?
So BZ is an abbreviation for quinacridinol benzylate.
Whoa.
And so that was a drug developed around World War II. So it's called different things. Like the Soviet name for it is Substance 78. The US Army code is EA 2277, but the NATO code is BZ. And they used to also call it Buzz. And so it's an incapacitating agent.
Mm-hmm.
It's odorless and it's often used in a gas. And it was developed after World War II. And it was, uh, there were experiments done in Vietnam. And obviously, there's Vietnamese people who were in the experiment, and Viet Cong POWs.
Yeah.
After they got back to the United States, they were taken to the Edgewater Arsenal in Maryland. And there, there for about 16 years there was a trial that was using BZ on military people, which is incredibly fucked up. And then last the last example where this drug was used on civilians, because when they were testing it in Vietnam, they were doing tests to see if it could be used domestically on Vietnam War protesters. And so there was a hostage situation where a bunch of Chechens took over a theater in Moscow in 2002, and the Moscow police shot BZ into the theater.
Whoa.
And 125 hostages died and 40 of the terrorists died. But it killed more hostages than terrorists. So
Yeah.
BZ is a very strong drug. And so during the, when it was getting tested, they were also putting it inside of explosives.
Whoa.
And so this ties in with the bomb metaphor, where Joan Didion describes her hometown as a testing site.
Yeah.
Yeah, so BZ is a very powerful name, a lot of meaning behind
Yeah,
this.
and he is the like agent of death. I mean, like
Yes.
more so than anybody else. I mean, yes, Carter essentially forces Mariah to get an abortion. Sure, like that's definitely something. But by the end of the book, you're like, man, BZ sucks. Like it's like you can't stand it. And there's a very again, a very cold, but once you I had to read it a couple times to see what actually happened at the end of the book with BZ, just essentially saying let's be true nihilists, right? And I kind of had to read it a couple times, but there is a passage in the book that allows you, anybody that thinks this is just a meaningless nihilist book, there are these parts where there's this beautifully, it's a chapter on its own, it's a paragraph, it's italicized, and it just says I think it's said in the movie as well, it's definitely the crux of why this book means something, but it's towards the end, and it goes like this: when I was 10 years old, my father taught me to assess quite rapidly the shifting probabilities on a craps layout. I could trace a layout in my sleep, the field here and the pass line all around, even money on big 6 or 8, 5 for 1 on any 7. Anyways, when I play back my father's voice with a professional rasp, it goes as it lays. Don't do it the hard way. My father advised me that life was a crap game. It was one of the two lessons I learned as a child. The other was that overturning a rock was apt to reveal a rattlesnake. As lessons go, those two seem to hold up but not apply. And it's weird. It's one of those things where that is true. Don't go looking where you shouldn't look, because that's essentially the H.P. Lovecraft. Hey man, there's stuff buried for a reason. There's just focus on what you can control. Stop snooping around. Stop looking for other things other than what you're actually going through, and just play the game. Just play the game, because if you don't want to play the game, why are you here? BZ doesn't want to play the game anymore.